CFL Week 13 betting tips and predictions coast to coast. Andrew and Bobby with you to hopefully guide you to some winners in Week 13. We've got a little bit of a different schedule this week in CFL action. We've got a game on Saturday, a game on Sunday, and 2 games on Monday. We'll break down all those games, go through some of the numbers here, and hopefully we can point you guys in the right direction. Bobby, how are you?
Good. And I have to start off by thanking you for kind of convincing me on that bowling shoe ugly Hamilton Tiger Cats bet over the weekend. I did a kind of a hedge on it, and I ended up saving myself
Awesome.
saving myself from Zach Collaros, I guess.
Awesome. Yeah, happy to hear it. I only got involved in 2 games last weekend, and that was one of them, Hamilton, which was always nice. You know it's a good thing when you have an ugly dog like that, when you're starting to get greedy and hope they win. That's how you know it's going well, when you're like, oh, man, I hope this team just wins outright. But I did take the loss on the BC Lions. The bounce back, and it felt great because I didn't get involved in Nathan Rourke's first start. But then I decided to jump in on the second one. Those teams will meet again this week, guys. So we'll jump into that game in just a few moments. But Bobby, any takeaways from the prior week? And if not, why don't you let us know who you think will be starting behind center for some of these teams this week?
Well, again, it's not who I think. It's until I'm proven wrong. It's not, I know. So the only real questions this week, I think, are Nathan Rourke, and I don't think that's a question from what I've seen. He'll be starting. Practice starts in half an hour, and he'll probably be taking out the first team reps. And the other interesting one is Edmonton. I think that Trey Ford is likely to come back, but like I've said a couple of times already this season, this doesn't really affect the line from my perspective either way, whether it's Ford or MBT. I think they're both around that like 9th, 10th, 11th kind of quarterback in the league. So nothing too controversial this week. People are trying to make a controversy in BC, but I don't think there is one yet.
And we'll see what happens out of that. One thing I will say is I really do like when CFL has headlines. I don't like it when it's forced. I don't like when there's like drama just being created out of thin air, but it is kind of nice to see stuff being talked about. And also, hey, look, let's get right into it. You're repping the jersey right now. It's good to see teams that haven't been strong make way up the standings, and as the CFL always does, their standings are the same as their power rankings. So this Ottawa Redblacks team making some moves, and I get it, there's only 9 teams in the league, but as we know, a lot of times these teams that struggle, they struggle for a few years, and teams that are doing well, they're doing well for many years in a row. So let's not waste any time. Let's dive right into game number 1. And again, guys, no Thursday game this week, no Saturday game. So lots of shelf life for this video. So if you guys are watching, whether it's on YouTube or X, please share the video, hit the like button, and comment to let us know what you guys are betting on. But Bobby, what's your take on this matchup as the home field switches Ottawa and BC?
So Nathan Rourke, 2 games already. He's been pretty well protected, I think, by the media. They've made plenty of excuses for him. Nathan Rourke hasn't made any of these excuses, but people have been saying he hasn't played in 2 years, which isn't really true. And essentially, Masoli didn't play for 2 years. He threw 10 passes in 2 years, and it didn't really affect him this badly. They said they're not practicing with the team was an issue. 3 days of practice wasn't enough. Well, Chad Kelly had 3 days of practice last week too, and it didn't really affect him either. So I don't know if I'm going to upset some people here, but when I added him back to I rank all the QBs in the CFL, and when I put him back in, I noticed that I had him below Collaros in his last year in the league, and I had him below where Chad Kelly was at the end of last year. So like I said, there's going to be an opportunity to bet against this hype. I didn't think it'd go this badly for him at the start. He's obviously like a top 5 QB in the league, and I wouldn't say he's the best. I'm not sure he ever has been. He definitely has the potential to be, but 0-2 against the spread so far, and it hasn't even been close. Like these games have been pretty bad for him. The scores, I think they have been indicative of the game flow. BC, sure, they had a lot of turnovers against Ottawa, but like Ottawa gave them right back to them a few times in that game. So like aside from that first quarter, I don't think there's any argument that the Redblacks like were the better team. And I'm wearing the jersey because I think the old Redblacks might be dead, because there was a moment in that fourth quarter where they were up by 3, 3rd and goal from the 1, and up until now, like that would have been an automatic field goal. Turn that one possession game into a one possession game and give the Lions the ball at the 40. But instead, maybe it's because it was the weekend. That kid was back on the sidelines telling the coach, no, go for it. But like he made the right decision. And I heard on the post game show in Ottawa, people, that was like their major takeaway, is that they're making better decisions in those situations. So like this is listed as a neutral game. Like it's not really, it's a home game for BC, just in a smaller venue. But instead of 30,000 in a dome, it's going to be 15,000 at a baseball field. So like I took a half point off, and taking that half point off for home field that isn't there was enough for me to make my pick. I think it's still 3.5 on some sites with a little juice, maybe 115, 120 at the most.
2.5 on DraftKings right now.
Oh, come on, DraftKings. Well, don't take 2.5. Like it's 3 is a key number still. So I think 3.5 is where I like 3.5 on FanDuel, and that's like the state mandated betting site there. So numbers do matter when it's 2.5, 3.5 in the CFL. So I don't like this at 2.5, but 3.5, I definitely like the Redblacks.
I have to thank you for something, because one thing I can definitely say I've learned from you throughout the season of doing this is following the coaching decisions a lot more. And don't get me wrong, it's not like I haven't like kept an eye on that across NFL and CFL in the past, but I wouldn't say you're hard on them. You're just aware of which coaches are going to make what type of decisions, which coaches are going to be conservative, which coaches are willing to throw out the challenge flag in a very Canadian football fashion. And it's good to know. It really is good to know which teams are going to be able to make some moves. And I thought Rick Campbell throwing out that OPI challenge gave me some life at one point. Unfortunately, it didn't end up really doing anything for them. But to have some coaches that are willing to take some chances is exciting. And I think that one thing I wanted to mention, all this Nathan Rourke talk, Bobby, how about Drew Brown? Why is this guy not getting some discussion? Why is this guy not being talked about? Well, I get it. This is the guy that didn't just come off of wearing 3 different NFL jerseys in a year and a half, and I understand that. But he had 390 yards, 28 of 37, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. They've got a lot of weapons and a lot of guys that can create yards after catch, which make him look good. But for him to sit out one game, kind of the concussion protocol, I believe that's what it was, right? And then to come back the next week and to play the way he did, I have a big circle around him as an over quarterback. And, you know, a lot of times what I've liked to do in years past with these scenarios, as I've mentioned to you before, because there's home and homes all the time in the CFL. It happens every couple of weeks, it seems. I like to kind of bet on the opposite thing to happen. I like to bet on the under if the first game went over, and one team if they lost the ATS wise the week previous. But I cannot bet an under with this Redblacks team right now. I can't. And, you know, their defense is okay. Don't get me wrong. But the funny thing is, I did say that some of their defensive numbers were a bit skewed. You know, we're a little bit off because, you know, how can you be at the bottom of one stat category and then be in middle of the pack or top for the other? Some things are going to work themselves out. And, you know, Farhan Lalji, a big shout out to him, because he had a great little Twitter video talking about that game overall last week. And he said, plain and simple, the team with the won the turnover battle won the game. And I'm not saying that's all that it's about, but when you look at the score being 34-27, Bobby, when I look at that score, I think there could have been a lot more for both teams, which is kind of scary when you think about how many points there already was in the game. And I think that there's obviously been a clear adjustment. We saw the total was in the late 40s to early 50s the last game, but I think at 51, I have no choice but to go towards the over here, 51 in the first game of week 13. And one thing Farhan said that I did agree with, he said that the problem is with BC is that it seems like it's something different with them every week. You know, if one week it's your running game, then one week it's your defense, one week it's your offense. It's hard to know what in particular to work on. Would you agree with him? That's kind of been a problem for them. That one week they're absolutely putting on a clinic defensively. The next week the quarterback is still able to give them 27 points. And then they still lose by a handful of points as well. That's hard to deal with a little bit. But at this point, there's only one way I could go, and it's the over. I think if BC performs and they're going to be hungry to come back, they're still going to give up points. And Ottawa has proven that they've got a lot of guys that can make plays. If we go down the list, I mean, we had a lot of guys get targets. We had a lot of guys in the rushing game kind of get touches as well. But let's go targets here. 12, 3, 6, 6, 5, and 4. So a ton of guys being targeted, a ton of guys being available in the offense for Ottawa. And that's really dangerous in the CFL when you're not just going to one guy every single play. And honestly, I think that's kind of hurt Hamilton a little bit, because I felt like lately Hamilton's been just forcing everything to Tim White because they paid the guy so much money. They felt like they had to get him back in, and then it became kind of predictive a little bit. But what are your thoughts about what Farhan was saying about how it's kind of been something different every week with them?
Yeah, it started off at the start of the year was the O-line was the issue. It still kind of seems like it is. Maybe the fact you have VA and Rourke as your quarterbacks, you can hide that a bit. But lately, it's just been straight up tackling. Like you see, like the Bombers and the Redblacks, they were running through guys. Basically, they're hanging off them like the kid who went through puberty first in high school, and all these little kids are just kind of ragdolling off of them, right? So there's a lot of issues with this team. Like you mentioned before we started here, like the power rankings, Ottawa's second, and the league power rankings, the standings, which we have to make clear. But I have them third. But it's only because Winnipeg, Saskatchewan are so banged up. Is BC that banged up? Like, I wouldn't say so. Maybe the linebackers a bit, but they have all their weapons there. Like they're not going to get healthier and get better. Where I think the Bombers and the Riders have that opportunity, and the Redblacks aren't either. That's also like in reality. I think the Redblacks are probably fourth, fifth best team, middle of the pack in this league. But right now, you have to use the power rankings for what they're used for, predicting week by week, not who's going to win the Grey Cup. So I just looked this up while you mentioned that. Like Drew Brown is 95 to 1 to win the MOP. And we mentioned in our video last week, like, can you give it to Cody Fajardo in the East just because he'd have missed some games? This is a whole, like this is a complete team that he's got there, right? And look at his receivers. Sure, they're banged up, but he's got a lot of weapons. Ottawa doesn't really have weapons. And the one thing that made me hesitant about Drew Brown was, has he really like stepped up and won a game yet? And I think that he did. He won that game for the Redblacks. And they've got kind of, I don't know how their schedule, it doesn't look too easy the rest of the way, but if like who else are the nominees in the East? And if you're not going to give it to Fajardo, people are going to make the argument once he's the nominee that he was just a game manager. I wouldn't say that, but there would be that narrative because the Alouettes defense has been so dominant. So I think that's an option. And just to go back to what you said last week in our video, I think this might be the week where you pull the trigger on VA. I think he's shot up to about 4 or 5 to 1 now. And if BC loses this week, I think VA is going in, and he's going to have the opportunity to take control of this team the rest of the way. Like, he's not going to be here after this year, but this year it's still VA's team, and I don't think there's going to be a big controversy if Rourke takes a seat behind him. So Rourke's not an option. He's only got a few games left here, and he hasn't really done anything. But I think VA, like you mentioned last week, is still an option here. And at 4 or 5 to 1, I don't think it's going to get any higher, especially if the Redblacks cover and win the game, like I've told you is going to happen.
All right. And it's interesting because a lot of the CFL fans were excited for him, but for Rourke coming back. But a lot of CFL fans, as well as CFL former players and even current players, were like, man, it's a cold world. It's a cold world. This guy's losing his job. It's a cold world. So it is interesting to see what happens, and also to see what happens in the off season after this CFL season. But like you said, this team right now belongs to Vernon Adams Jr. And as much as TSN and the CFL as a league wanted Rourke to come in and absolutely light things up, it hasn't happened. It just hasn't happened. So if you're going to get outperformed by Drew Brown, a guy that's not sniffing any practice rosters in the NFL anytime soon, well, it's not really a good look for you when you have VA doing his rehab, getting healthy, and kind of knocking on that door. So this game should be interesting. There'll be a lot of interesting CFL headlines as far as that one's concerned. And I will mention, because they aren't really playing this week, Cody Fajardo, is he the Brock Purdy of the CFL? Is that who he is? Can we get a Brock Purdy comparison? Because two dynamite teams with so many weapons, great defense. And I'm a Brock Purdy guy, so it's funny because I've made jokes about Fajardo to you throughout the season. But I don't like it when a quarterback is on a good team and he gets blamed for being on a good team, because it's also the same thing as when the Dallas Cowboys weren't performing at a high level, and in garbage time, down 14 points, Dak Prescott was just throwing the ball in prevent defense, and all of a sudden people are like, wow, look at the numbers he's putting up for his passing yards. Well, it's because the team is down 14 and they can't run the ball. So a game manager means he's doing something proper. But I also do think sometimes a defense can a little bit take away from what a quarterback is doing. So
I think he's the favorite for a reason. Just like when you're betting these futures, you're not gonna enjoy taking the favorites though. So you need to try and find some value. And if you're gonna tell me does Drew Brown have better than a 1.5% chance of being the nominee out of the East, I'd say yes. So. That's why I think there's value there. But yeah, Cody Fajardo, he's you could argue he's the best quarterback in the league right now.
All right, Winnipeg plus 2.5-ish here versus Saskatchewan on the road, 47.5 being the total. Saskatchewan, one thing about them, Bobby, in games that they've struggled in, it's been very dramatic. They haven't really had any games where they've been like blown out in some of the games that they've struggled in. And I find sometimes as a bettor and also as someone that might be rooting on the team, it's probably difficult for those people, because you wonder, is there really something wrong with this team? Are they right there? Are they not right there? And now they're playing against the Winnipeg team that's been playing some good ball for a handful of weeks now. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I was surprised that this line is this big. It's not big enough for me to jump on the Bombers, but I thought this would be closer to like a 1 point or a pick. Maybe you just look at Zach Collaros. People forget that when Taylor Cornelius was in this league throwing the most ridiculous interceptions, Zach Collaros was just as good at throwing ridiculous interceptions, like from his knees, and when no business throwing these things. So he threw a few ugly ones this last weekend. 3 interceptions, but they still won. Now, I don't think that he's going to be throwing 3 picks against the Riders this weekend, but if he does, there's no way they're winning this game. The Riders are not the Hamilton Tiger Cats, no matter what we were saying at the beginning of the show. That Hamilton's still a terrible team. I don't really have any play on this. I gave a little bit of an extra home field advantage just for this game because it's so big in Regina. And these teams, like I said, they're the most banged up in the league, and they're only going to get healthier. I think the winner of this basically is in control of the division. If it's Winnipeg, I think it's locked up because BC can't pass them in the tie. They have the tiebreaker over BC, and they're going to be going home to host the Riders next week. So you look at these futures, Riders and Winnipeg, they're both still at like 5-6 to 1 right now to win the Grey Cup. I think they're the 2 favorites. I don't think BC should be favored at all to win the Grey Cup, let alone be in it out of the West. So nothing on this game. If this goes to a 3, I'll have to take it for the Bombers. But Maybe a teaser leg. If you look at this game and you look at this Redblacks Lions game, I'd say the more likely game to see a blowout would be the Redblacks Lions. I think this game's going to be close in Regina, so I think it's a good teaser leg by taking the road dog. But then you're like, what are you pairing that with? Toronto on the road? Probably not.
Is this the Banjo Bowl or is that next week?
No, this is a Labor Day Classic. The Banjo
Labor Day Classic, right.
Banjo Bowl for the Banjo pick and inbreds is next week. Not my words.
Okay, yeah. Not his words, right. The Labor Day Classic and then Banjo. Okay, because they do it back-to-back. So, and that's one thing that I always say about these back-to-backs is, of course, there's not as much into the home field as it used to be. And you just said something that I've said all year is I think Saskatchewan is one of those teams that I do give that a little bit of an edge to at home. But a lot of these teams in the CFL, I don't really give them much at home. But the thing is that a lot of these teams in these highly touted matchups, I know it might sound crazy. Oh, it's only 2.5, 3, but whatever it might be. The road teams have good ATS success because they're often the dogs. And so what I find funny is that they'll play back-to-back weeks and both road teams will win and just crush the home fans. Like they're both trying to have a big game. It's an exciting matchup, the rivalry weekend back-to-back. And then a lot of times what happens is these road teams end up having success in both games of the home and home. Bobby, no thoughts for me on the side right now. I'm still thinking about how I feel about that one, but I am going to lean with the under in this one. I think so much has been going on with Saskatchewan right now. They've proven to have two solid backs. I think that when AJ Ouellette's been out, they've had a solid run with Hickson, and I think that Ouellette is kind of more that kind of bigger built guy that can kind of get them a handful of yards, and Hickson he definitely has that speed, a little bit smaller. He can run. Trevor Harris, since he got back, maybe a couple missed throws here and there. He's still been pretty good. Finally, Brett Lowther, I shouldn't say finally, Brett Lowther bounced back last week, going perfect. Could have used that 2 weeks ago, Brett. But this matchup, to me, I look at Winnipeg. We talked about flat spots. You messaged me and we're like, is flat spots really a thing here in the CFL? But, this has been kind of a hectic couple weeks here for Winnipeg after the start that they had to their season. Remember how we had people calling them lose-a-peg. This is a team that couldn't win. They were struggling to score points. I still think that their best part of their game is their defense. And you mentioned Zach Collaros. It's a red flag when this guy throws a ball longer than 30 yards right now at this point. I think his accuracy has gone downhill big time, and hopefully that continues to be that way. And so I'll go under here. 47.5 is the total that I'm seeing. And I'm confident this game could be a battle. And a lot of times when you have a rivalry weekend like this, you want to talk about coaches making bold decisions, Bobby. I think they don't make these decisions in this week. I think you see a lot of if you're within that range for the field goal, you choose to kick it a lot more and punt it than going for it. You just want to have that extra edge. I feel like a lot of times when these two teams play, they're playing chess. They're just playing a special teams battle. So with that being said, it might be kind of a hold your nose type of play, but under is what stuck out to me between these two teams. And we'll see what kind of movement we get here, guys, because 5 is the biggest number we're seeing on the board this week, and that's Toronto laying the points on the highway. And yes, it is literally on the highway because they're playing Hamilton as its rivalry Labor Day weekend. What are your thoughts on that one?
Okay, so we beat this to death with Collaros already, but if it wasn't for Collaros, Hamilton, I don't think is coming back in that game. They needed 2 big interceptions to finally score. So I don't know. Hamilton didn't really impress me. It did just kind of seem like a flat spot for the Bombers looking ahead and through the BC Lions games that they've just played. I want to take the Argos here. I think Toronto played well last week. They left a few points on the table as well. And here you have kind of like a reverse narrative with Chad Kelly. Nobody likes the guy, and fair enough, but you can't let that cloud your judgment if you're going to be putting money on these games, right? He's still a good quarterback, and he has the potential to be the best in the league. He was the best in the league last year. He didn't look too rusty fair enough. He wasn't executing at 100%, but he didn't look too bad last week. So I like the Argos this week. I don't really like the 4.5, 5. I like that to go down a little bit, but I don't know how that's going to happen. I don't know how people could be backing Hamilton at this number. They've been getting blown out week by week and just got a few important turnovers against the Bombers. So nothing for me here. I'd lean Toronto, I guess, but I'm just looking forward to a game where the coaches aren't going to cost their team the win. These are two coaches that get it. We saw that over the weekend when Dinwiddie went for it 3 different times from the goal line. They failed every single time, but 2 minutes later, they kicked the field goal that they would have kicked anyway. So all you got to do is go for it. If you fail, you've pinned them at the 1, you're probably getting the ball back. And that's exactly what happened. So it's nice to see it. These are 2 coaches that get it. And I'm just looking forward to not being as frustrated as I usually am watching CFL games.
Yeah, these coaches won't screw you; their teams will. They'll leave it to the players to screw you over. They won't screw you over themselves. And I talked a lot about the road teams being sometimes a bet that I look for because of the value you're going to get. And I get what you're saying there, the 5. But let's put it this way: if it's 5 right now on the road, what's the number at home for Toronto? I know we say all the time Toronto isn't the biggest home field advantage, but the bookmakers will give something to them. So they're probably laying a touchdown at home against this Hamilton team right now. And you mentioned it, Chad Kelly, he hasn't been absolutely, lighting it up by any means, but I think that it only comes with time. And what does a guy like him, that I've definitely labeled as someone that has a little bit of an ego, love to do more? He loves to beat the rival. He loves to beat the rivalry teams. He wants to crush the teams that, he knows that his fan base wants to beat the most. And he'll get up for this game. I think this team is ready for this game. And I think that Hamilton, the best thing they were going to do for their fans is backdoor cover last week because they weren't going to win that game. And they're not going to win this game. And, something, I don't know. I honestly have no clue what Chris Jones has on the league. I don't know if he knows something about somebody that he's like holding behind them, but before he's done, he's going to coach for all 9 teams in the league. It just seems like it's bound to happen. I really don't think that he is the make or break guy for their defense. I feel like it's the characters, that are out there. It's not the coaching that was necessarily the problem. Sure, they make some plays. And Chris Jones is a guy that loves to blitz. He loves to send a lot of guys. But Chad Kelly is a smart quarterback. He'll make decisions very quickly, similarly to what people wanted Nathan Rourke to be able to do again when he came back into the league. And I feel like if they just rush him, he's going to have no problem dumping it off. And then when they don't rush him, he'll make a deep play and get the job done. So not sure how I'm going to play the Argos quite yet, but we'll probably be on there in some way, shape, or form. More good information each week for CFL. Good job, guys. And Rouge saved out Argo's moneyline bet last week. Yeah, how could we not mention that? Thanks for watching again, as always. How could we not mention that? Well, Bobby, I didn't bring it up because it bothered me, so I don't really want to talk about stuff like that kind of pisses me off. But that's CFL for you, right?
Yeah, and I got burned on a 1 point, taking this 1 point a few weeks ago. I think it was in the I'm not sure which game it was, but
it was the tie, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the tie. So some of these sites, they don't like me. They wouldn't let me bet money line. They would only let me bet -1, even at their posted odds. So, but the 1 point is actually the third most common number in the CFL, and it's pretty close. Like it's almost at the point where the 7 is. So like 3 is huge. It's about the same percentage in NFL and CFL games staying three or less. 7, not as important as it is in the NFL. And then 1 is the third most common number, which I think is ridiculous. But that's the kind of game, the kind of game it is. So the only thing I thought, like they said, he was blasting it through. He knew he won the game by missing that field goal, but he could have kicked it I think it's like 65 yards wide the field. And you're aiming right at the upright, where if you doink that, it's going overtime. So I don't really think it was executed as well as people say it was. But yeah, all I needed to do was blast it through, and I don't know if it's a stupid rule or not. I'm kind of indifferent to it, but some people are pretty worked up about it, north and south of the border.
You could tell how hard he kicked it, though. Like, I'm sure kickers like kick like relatively the same no matter what the kick is, but at the same time, like you would have thought he was kicking like a 52-yarder with how he kicked that. So there was definitely some intent behind that. But to your point, if that would have gone off the bar, that would have made an even funnier moment because it was a chip shot. That's all it was a chip shot. But that's the CFL.
They could have punted it too, right? So
yeah,
you just need to kick it. The quarterback could have kicked it through if he wanted, and maybe not the quarterback, because then you'll get one of those. There's a famous play out there with Rod Black calling where they're kicking it back and forth outside of the end zone. It was a chip shot, so it wasn't going to come to that. But I just think too many things can go wrong going for that field goal. I would have just punted it through, punt for the win. That'd be making even more headlines.
All right, so last game we'll discuss here, Edmonton, Calgary. One thing I always say is that when you have two teams like this going head to head, and I'm going to get 3 in the hook, I'm going to take the team that's the underdog. That strategy has worked for me a lot this season. And I feel like the theme for me of this show has been talking about the value you get on road teams in the CFL and how compared to, let's say, Monday Night Football in the NFL, where there's that home team getting the edge and then you can take that plus 3.5. I get that, but there's also not as much home field advantage in the CFL as there might be for some teams in the NFL. Even though home dogs have success, the road dogs in CFL getting 3.5 have seemed to have a lot of success. And when you're going to put Calgary and Edmonton together, Calgary's a team that's been rested. I think they've gotten healthier, but they're also a team that's given up a ton of points. So do you see them, if they even beating anybody by more than a field goal right now?
No, and I think if Trey Ford gets announced as a starter, this will come back below the 3. I think these two teams are pretty even though they're very volatile. They can be really bad or really good. Calgary is good and bad based on the quarter. The home field in Calgary used to mean something. It doesn't anymore. It hasn't meant anything since 2018. But they're off the bye. So a slight favorite feels right. But yeah, I agree with you. I think 3 in a hook is a little too much. Not enough for me to go in, but I think it could be if it goes any higher, or if the line comes down. I don't mind chasing a little steam if you're just going to tease it right back up through the 3 and the 7. So makes me a little nervous having all these road teaser possibilities, but and even the Toronto as a road favorite coming down as a teaser too. It's not my favorite thing to do, but like you showed last week with Hamilton, so the ugliest bets are the most rewarding, at least.
And it's the best part with those ones. It's not just win, baby. It's just cover. And that's all they did for us. They had a chance at one point to kind of tie the game, but just cover is all we're asking. And lately, that's what we've been asking of the Edmonton Elks. And depending on what number you got last week, the Elks did cover for some people, and they didn't cover for others. So that was a really important game as far as the wonky CFL key numbers are concerned. You do a good job of mentioning those, but also with some of these weird scoring in the CFL, it's hard to know what the key numbers really are. But as of right now, I would be on the road team in that one. I love getting 3.5 points in matchups like this when I don't love either team, because you're watching the game at home. You're looking at the game and you're thinking to yourself, let's just keep it close. It can be the ugliest game possible, and all you want is it to be close. And I think the team like Calgary, when they have success, they're still going down to the wire against teams. So 3 in the hook, that's a play that I'll probably be involved in there with the road team. And other than that, we'll have a lot of thoughts about these games, about some of these quarterbacks and some rematches next week. Any more takeaways before we head out?
Yeah, if you're making the argument for 3.5 road dog, there's plenty of room on the Redblacks bandwagon for you. So don't be shy. The water's warm at least for the next few weeks while these other teams are banged up. But yeah, lots of it, lots of key numbers in these games, and I think our likelihood of seeing a middle here is pretty high.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching. As always, last week we had you guys watching our futures show. We had you guys watching our typical weekly predictions. So do us a favor, hit the like button, and make sure you follow us both on X. We're also posting all kinds of picks and thoughts as well. Remember, those guys on TV, they might know CFL. Does not mean they know CFL betting. We're both having great years. Hopefully you guys join us. Hopefully we can make some money in week 13. All the best. We'll see you next time here on Coast to Coast.